As most people are aware, Final Fantasy is about stories and characters first and foremost. But these are also video games and therefore must seek to be fun to play. The first 10 numbered games in the series are built around various forms of turn or active time-based traditional RPG combat, but we tend to account for the entire multiverse here, so expect some variety. Naturally, opinions on this are likely to vary wildly, so please feel free to respectfully leave your own list down in the comments. My name is Drew Kreisman. I am one half of the Final Fantasy Weekly podcast, and these are my picks for the top 10 battle systems of the Final Fantasy multiverse. Let's start with an honorable mention, and it's Final Fantasy XIV. So, I'm not the biggest fan of MMOs. Honestly, I'm not even sure I'm actually playing this game correctly. I often feel a bit lost and don't engage with it much beyond the story these days. That said, I wanted to mention that considering everything I just said, I've put hundreds and hundreds of hours into this game and enjoyed the vast majority of it. Final Fantasy XIV's biggest gameplay success, for me anyway, is making such a potentially intimidating foray into a new genre so inviting. Number 10, Final Fantasy XVI. Have you ever thought, what if my Final Fantasy class was based upon the summons? Well, we did a lot, and then Final Fantasy XVI gave it to us. The icon system was a blast to play, putting the power of the gods in your hands in a way that no other game in the series, or probably in gaming, ever quite has. Hyper-cinematic battles which employ an excellent use of quick-time events and a combination of action-based button mashing and swapping between icons to affect playstyles make Final Fantasy XVI arguably the most exhilarating gameplay in the franchise, with easily the best boss battles in franchise history. Number 9, Final Fantasy XII. The 11th entry ventured online, which was a massive departure for the series, and many who were hoping that the 12th entry would revert back to the days of old were severely disappointed by a game that felt very much like an offline version of an MMO. The critics will tell you that the game plays itself. The proponents will tell you that therein lies the genius. With basic attacking set to automatic, the Gambit system allows the player to create an incredibly elaborate series of if-then commands to give to each hero. The thrill comes in seeing your preparation for each eventuality, and in cleverly balancing the game's job system, at least in the Zodiac version, resulting in some of the most satisfying strategic planning and tactical engagement in the franchise. Number 8, Final Fantasy VII. There isn't a ton about 7's baseline battle system that sets it apart from other ATB games that came before or after. Much like with Final Fantasy XII, the success is in the menus between battles. The materia system was a revelation in customization. It does, unfortunately in my opinion, largely erase any difference between how each character plays, but on the flip side, you are granted the freedom to make all kinds of wonderful concoctions. Where most Final Fantasies limited you to a few preconceived jobs, 7 essentially allowed you to create them out of thin air and assign them to whoever you wanted. You could spend countless hours coming up with combinations and builds that result in totally different playthroughs. Also, while 6 does get a shout out for the desperation attacks, 7 really is where the concept of limit breaks took off and became an essential part of the series. Number 7, Final Fantasy V. Not to sound like a politician running for office or anything, but jobs, jobs, jobs. Hiroyuki Ito, who is responsible for about 90% of the magic on this list, invented the job system with Final Fantasy III, but he came close to perfecting it with Final Fantasy V. The wide variety of ways to play the game was almost unheard of at the time. So many jobs and abilities to unlock and then to mix and match. It is still amazing that this Super Nintendo game allowed for the level of customization and creativity that it did, and it is just as fun to play today as it was in its own time. Speaking of time, number 6, Chrono Cross. A game with an odd and unique reputation, Chrono Cross also has an odd and unique spin on turn-based combat. Everything about it functions just a bit differently than what we would expect from a more traditional JRPG, most especially the field effect. Every spell has an element, and every time one is cast, it changes the environment of the battle, creating a fight not only for hit points, but over control of the field. I don't want to spoil anything, but clever manipulations of this system can even impact the story in a dramatic way, and that is super rare and really cool. Number 5, Kingdom Hearts 2. After a clunky but admirable foray into action RPGs with the first entry in the series, Kingdom Hearts 2 improved upon its predecessor in every way and still stands as an incredibly fun game to play. It's fast-paced and pretty intense on the button pressing, making it quite a bit different from most of the games on this list, but it also manages to incorporate a lot of RPG elements in clever ways. Apart from the fact that I am still waiting for Donald to cast Cure, seriously, if any game could have used a Gambit system, it's this one. Kingdom Hearts 2 does an excellent job of balancing multiple systems and lots of chaos into one of the more satisfying power fantasies in gaming. Number 4, Final Fantasy X. The culmination of everything that came before it, Final Fantasy X takes most of the best ideas from the first 9 games and perfects them. Overdrives improved and expanded upon limit breaks in almost every way. The sphere grid allowed for a ton of character customization, while smart monster and level design combined with natural predilections still made each of our Warriors of Light feel unique. The way turns work allow you to control the pace of battle. You don't have to wait around for an ATB bar, meaning that you can push the battle along quickly or take your time if you need it. If traditional and turn-based is your jam, it doesn't get much better than this. Number 3, Final Fantasy Tactics. In hindsight, formula seemed simple. Take the brilliance of Ito's job system and combine it with the splendor of Yasumi Matsuno's tactical design and you get a timeless classic. And that's exactly what Final Fantasy Tactics is. Customizing your characters and squads, managing your troops in the field, taking advantage of positioning and terrain, it all feels engaging and rewarding, if a bit punishing at times. It too is as playable today as it has ever been, except that it is frustratingly unavailable on most modern consoles. Come on, Square Enix, do the right thing. Remake, remaster, or at the very least re-release this masterpiece. Number 2, Final Fantasy X-2. Yep, best combination of ATB, a job system, well-balanced stat-driven combat, and all the over-the-top aesthetics you could possibly hope for. The coup de grace for this game is the ability to change jobs in the middle of battle, which is not only spectacular to behold, as the ladies transform from fantastical, colorful costume to fantastical, colorful costume, but also incredibly satisfying to master, as all kinds of abilities and attributes can be connected in all kinds of ways. It takes the fun of playing around in the menus with games like Final Fantasy V and Tactics, and takes it onto the field of battle, where changes and choices are made on the fly, culminating in the best version of a classic Final Fantasy battle system to ever exist, in my opinion. And number 1, Final Fantasy VII Remake. There has been a battle, get it, since the 10th entry, both internally and among fans, about how Final Fantasy can move into the modern era, produce the kind of hype-inducing, fast-paced action sequences that their cutscenes and movies have always shown they want to deliver, and also not completely abandon the roots of strategy-based RPGs that made them popular in the first place. While clearly not everyone agrees, I believe that question was finally answered with Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's important to note that we remain of the opinion that the series can and should continue to evolve and change in whatever ways it needs to, and there is simply not one correct formula for how to do it. But Remake feels like it sits right on the sweet spot of giving us the best of all worlds. Waiting around has been replaced by fighting frantically, blocking, dodging, countering, positioning, and strategizing for what to do with that next bit of ATB. The materia system makes a triumphant return, bringing its remarkable customization options with it, but this time, each character still plays differently thanks to a myriad of new innovations. Limit breaks and summons are better than ever, and things really took off once Yuffie's DLC introduced the synergy system and team-up attacks. It also appears as though Rebirth is set to make even more improvements, meaning that, as is often the case with Final Fantasy, the best yet is just over the next horizon.